Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this informational webinar on FutureReady. My name is Jaylee Schultz, and I serve as Deputy Executive Director for the State Board of Education. We're excited to have you with us as we share about this important initiative to modernize Washington's high school graduation requirements.
I'm Melissa Muller, Director of Policy for the State Board. Together, we'll be guiding you through today's presentation. We really appreciate all of you taking the time out of your busy schedules to learn more about this initiative and the thoughtful approach we're taking to develop it.
In the next hour, we'll provide an overview of the current state of graduation requirements, introduce you to the FutureReady initiative, and share details about how we're working with partners and communities to ensure the proposal the board develops reflects a comprehensive and equitable vision for Washington students. Before we get into the content of today's webinar, let's go over a few housekeeping items. First, this session is informational, so all attendees will be in listen-only mode for most of the webinar. That said, we do want to hear from you too, so we'll be using some Zoom polls and opening up the chat feature at certain points to collect your thoughts. If you have questions, you can submit them at any time using the Q&A function, and we'll address as many as we can during the webinar. And finally, we know some of you may want to refer back to this information later or share it with your colleagues. So the slide deck and a recording of this webinar will be shared with all registrants afterwards. We want to start by clarifying something important. The State Board of Education is not proposing any changes to graduation requirements at this time. Instead, what we're presenting today is the approach and process the board is taking to review the requirements and to develop thoughtful recommendations. This approach is designed to be more collaborative, inclusive, and comprehensive, with a stronger focus on how any changes would be implemented effectively. So if you came here to hear about specific changes today, that's not what this session is about. The board is in the early stages of launching this process and aims to engage authentically with partners in developing the proposal. So we're starting with the issues and questions to explore rather than beginning with predetermined changes in mind. Okay, so thank you for bearing with us as we set the stage. Before we dive in any further, we'd like to take a moment to learn more about all of you joining us today. This helps us understand who's in the room, where you're coming from, and what perspectives you bring to the conversation. We're launching a few quick polls now, which you'll see pop up on your screen. While we're running the polls, we're also opening the chat feature for a few minutes. If you'd like, feel free to share why you're interested in FutureReady. We'd love to hear what brought you here today. Okay, just confirming, are the results showing on the screen now? Yes, okay, I see a thumbs up. Thank you. Okay, so it looks like we've got a lot of school personnel and district personnel. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Excited to see some parents and guardians, even a few students showing up, and agency personnel, business partners, and a couple others. Thank you all so much for being here. Of course, we've got a large presence from the Puget Sound, some Eastern and other parts of the state. And looks like 61% have heard about FutureReady but don't know much about the details. And for some of you, it's your first time hearing about it. And then we have a few who are very familiar. So thank you all for letting us know, and also to those who have been entering responses into chat. Okay. Well, it's great to know more about who's in the audience with us today. And now that we've learned a little about you, let's take a moment to share some background about the State Board of Education to help set the conversation. So we are a 16-member policy board supported by a small staff of 12. Our members bring a wide range of perspectives and include 2 student members, the superintendent of public instruction, a representative of private schools, 5 members elected by school board directors from across the state, and 7 members appointed by the governor. As a policy board, our primary role is to shape policies and advocate for the state's K-12 public education system. Our mission is to cultivate an equitable and inclusive K-12 education system that fulfills our vision of every student being empowered with the knowledge and skills they need to thrive in a rapidly changing world. This mission guides all our work from collaborating with partners to developing policy and advocating for transformative change. In addition to the board's advocacy and oversight role, we also focus on some specific policy areas, with one of the most notable being graduation requirements. The Future Ready initiative sits squarely within the board's statutory authority. Under state law, we are responsible for establishing graduation requirements, periodically reevaluating them, and proposing changes to the state legislature. This process of review and improvement is a regular part of the board's duties and helps ensure that graduation requirements remain relevant, equitable, and aligned with the needs of Washington students and communities. Now, to provide some important context, I'd like to hand things over to my colleague Alyssa Muller to walk us through the current state of our high school graduation requirements.
Thanks, Jaylee, and hello, everyone. Before we discuss what's next with FutureReady, it's essential to understand where we currently stand with our graduation requirements. Whether you're well-versed in this topic or new to it, this brief background will ensure that we're starting from a place of shared understanding. I'll highlight the main components of our current graduation requirement framework, some of the challenges we've identified, and emerging trends that are shaping legislative interest both in our state and nationally as we consider a redesign. This context will help us understand how FutureReady builds on the foundation we have today to better prepare students for tomorrow. Let's get started. So, as many folks in the audience know, in Washington, we have three big components in our state graduation requirement framework that work together to signal that a student is ready for success in post-secondary education, gainful employment, civic engagement, and lifelong learning. Based on a student's high school and beyond plan, a student will choose how to meet the subject area graduation requirements, as well as choose which graduation pathway option makes sense for them based on their post-secondary plans. So let's dive a little deeper into each one of these components. Next slide, please, Jaylee. The first component is the High School and Beyond Plan. It's designed to support students in exploring what they would like to do after high school and how to prepare for those goals. It should guide selection of coursework and activities aligned to the student's interests. It also serves to keep track of major assessment scores and to log the student's work, school activities, community service, and other relevant experience so that students have a resume or activity log by the time they graduate. Plans should be started by 7th grade and should be updated annually during the student's high school journey. Now, we know that implementation of this requirement in particular varies a lot around the state. There are a lot of school districts that have really invested time and resources into the High School and Beyond plan, and we hear from students in those districts that this requirement is really meaningful to them. There are other districts across the state that juggling other priorities. This has been more of a check the box requirement. And so we get that feedback from students and parents as well. And we're aware of how implementation varies across the state. There's been recent legislation that could make this requirement more meaningful with OSPI's work around the uniform or universal online platform that should help make implementation a little bit more equitable around the state. And we look forward to more of OSPI's work in that area. Next slide, please. The state's graduation requirements include a total of 24 required credits, including 17 core credits and 7 flexible credits. The core credits include 4 English language arts, 3 science, 3 math, 3 social studies, 2 health and fitness, including 1.5 credits of physical education and a half credit of health, 1 arts credit, and 1 career and technical education credit. The flexible credits include 4 electives and 3 personalized pathway requirements, which are electives aligned with the student's high school and beyond plan. It's very common for students to complete 2 world language credits and a second arts credit, but these courses can be replaced with other electives if there's something else that better aligns with the student's plan. If this looks different from your local school's experience, it's possible that you're in a district that has added additional local requirements on top of the state requirements. When that happens, sometimes it limits the number of elective credits that are up to the student's choice. It's also possible for local districts to require more than 24 credits, and this oftentimes is connected to the type of bell schedule a school district decides to use, such as a trimester schedule. Next slide. Now we're going to move on to talk about the third component of the diploma, which is the graduation pathway option. This is a graduation requirement that began with the class of 2020, but implementation has been disrupted due to COVID. Prior to having graduation pathways, students were required to pass exit exams or acceptable alternatives in order to graduate. The legislation that created pathways served to delink standardized testing from graduation and replace it with a system of multiple options that are intended to be individualized and to allow students to show they are ready for their own education and career goals after high school. Most of the pathway options are still test based, but a variety of tests are recognized, and there are also course based options. The original pathway options include the Smarter Balance State Assessment, dual credit courses, AP, IB, and Cambridge exams, SAT and ACT college entrance exams, transition courses, combinations of the above pathways, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, and career and technical education course sequences. The legislature also tasked the State Board of Education with doing research around these original pathways. And while this research did occur during the height of the pandemic, um, it became very clear that there were some changes needed to the pathways. In particular, we heard that the original 8 pathways did not always align with students' post graduation goals, and it was consistently expressed that there was a need for more relevant, engaging, and authentic options that can be better customized to better align with students' individual goals. I also want to acknowledge the ongoing implementation challenges with the pathways. Even now, we're hearing that many school districts don't talk with pathways with their students until a student fails the Smarter Balanced assessment. So we know that in some ways, schools are still struggling to adapt to making sure that the graduation pathways are really meaningful to all students. In 2023, the performance based pathway was adopted by the legislature. It allows students to show what they know and can do in real hands on ways that aligned with their individualized goals for life after high school. And this pathway was really intended to be more student centered and customizable with the aim of being relevant and engaging to the individual student. It has a lot of flexibility regarding the form it can take. This could be a student project or a work related experience, a community service activity, or a cultural activity. And it can also result in a variety of student work that can be evaluated. For instance, a performance, a presentation, a portfolio, a report, a film, or an exhibition. But the product to be evaluated must also include a reflection on how the learning experience aligns to the student's goals as described in their high school and beyond plan, and a self evaluation on the skills and knowledge the student gained through the learning experience. So, the way that this pathway could look varies a lot depending on how the school district decides to implement their policy and procedure around the pathway. It may or may not be completed as part of a class where the student also earns credit, but you can learn a lot more about the performance-based pathway and those particular requirements on our performance-based pathway webpage. Next slide. So as I mentioned previously, local districts have authority to add additional credit and subject area requirements, as well as other graduation requirements like community service hours or senior project, etc. So I want to acknowledge that graduation requirements do vary from district to district around the state. Additionally, in our state, there are both required and encouraged educational offerings at each school district. So, beyond the graduation requirements we've already discussed, there are other required offerings school districts must provide access to, like financial education standards. Um, that all students must receive access to these financial education standards, but districts have choice in how they provide this instruction. So it might be part of a class, it might not, it could look a lot of different ways. Additionally, there are other required offerings around, for example, Disability History Month, the John McCoy Since Time Immemorial curriculum, etc. There are also recommended educational offerings that districts should consider offering, like the sale of biliteracy and ethnic studies. There are roughly 16 required offerings and several other recommended offerings, and you can learn more about all of these on SBE's website, and we can pop a link into chat about that as well. Next slide. So there's been a growing national movement to really recognize learning beyond traditional seat time and to empower students to take ownership of their own educational journey. This shift emphasizes providing students with more relevant and engaging learning experiences, such as interdisciplinary and project based approaches, as well as more ways for students to show what they know and can do. These include real world hands on experiences both within and beyond the classroom. In our state, there's also increasing interest in mastery or competency based learning, which allows students to progress at their own pace based on their understanding of the material. So, as our world evolves, it's essential to rethink graduation requirements to align with these innovative pedagogical approaches and to better prepare students for the future. Next slide. So, changing gears just a little bit, I want to also take a moment to talk about our state's profile of a graduate. This was developed by the state's Mastery Based Learning Work Group with support from the board and valuable input from community stakeholders. The profile of a graduate outlines the essential knowledge, skills, and abilities our students should develop over the course of their K 12 educational journey. The profile builds on the foundation of core subject based knowledge and enhances it by really highlighting the development of essential cross cutting skills such as critical thinking, communication, collaboration, problem solving, creativity, and empathy. The profile serves as a guide and a tool for improving the overall quality of education, ensuring that our students develop not only the knowledge they need, but also the abilities to adapt, collaborate, and excel in a rapidly changing world. The state board's 24 to 28 strategic plan solidifies our commitment to using the profile in our efforts to improve the education system. Our aim is to make sure that every part of our education system, from what students learn to how we measure their progress and engage with our communities, lines up with what we believe is crucial for students to thrive in the future. So, with that understanding of where we currently stand, I'll now hand things back over to Jay Lee to dive into the Future Ready initiative and what's on the horizon.
All right, thank you, Alyssa. And also just noticing that some questions are coming to the panelists through the chat, and just want to encourage and remind folks to use the Q&A feature for questions to allow other participants to be able to see the responses as well. All right, so let's dive into talking about Future Ready. This multi-year effort aims to comprehensively update Washington's high school graduation requirements. Our approach involves working collaboratively with a diverse group of education partners, with a special emphasis on centering the voices of populations most impacted by these changes that have not been well served by the education system and that have historically been excluded from the policy development process. Rather than making incremental adjustments, we're looking at the whole framework to ensure it prepares students for an ever-changing world. This includes integrating essential skills like financial education and digital literacy while promoting interdisciplinary inclusive learning. The multi-year initiative culminates in a legislative proposal for the 27th session. Importantly, any changes that come out of this work will be phased in to support thoughtful and effective implementation. So why is this modernization effort necessary? Well, first, the workforce demands it. A recent report from Washington Roundtable shows that 75% of job openings in Washington will require post-secondary education. Yet only about half of our high school graduates are enrolling within a year of graduating. That's a 12 percentage points below the national average. At the same time, students are telling us their learning experiences often lack meaning. Over 30% of high schoolers in Washington say their coursework isn't meaningful or important. Similar percentages think that what they're learning in school is going to be only slightly or not at all important for them later in life. This disconnect highlights the need for a system that engages students and better prepares them for the future. The board frequently hears from stakeholders who express concerns that fall into two seemingly opposing viewpoints. Some say the graduation requirements don't do enough. They don't fully prepare students for success after high school. Others argue the requirements are too much. They place unnecessary barriers in students' paths. At first glance, these perspectives might seem contradictory, and they do often seem to be pitted against one another. But the board has found that both can be true at the same time. It's possible for the requirements to fall short in some ways, while also being overly complex or burdensome in others. This dual reality underscores the need for a comprehensive approach to updating the graduation requirements. By addressing both concerns simultaneously, we can create a system that better supports all students in achieving their goals while removing unnecessary obstacles. Now we'd like to hear from you and how you would rank these challenges. We'll also open the chat back up in case you have additional thoughts you'd like to share. Okay, I think it's sharing now. Thank you. Okay, so here are the results of the poll. It looks like the lighter blue color is for the most significant. The darker blue is ranked 2, and then the orange is for 3. The 4 is in that turquoise-ish color. The colors are kind of challenging, but they generally go from left to right. So it looks like the one with the highest rate for most significant was the one about relying too much on traditional classroom and seat time approaches, followed by not adequately addressing skills students need for the future. Great. Thank you all for participating. Okay. So moving on now, the board has been collecting stakeholder input on graduation requirements over the past several years, laying a strong foundation for this initiative. Back in 2022, the legislature directed the board to explore aligning graduation requirements with the profile of a graduate. You may recall that Alyssa presented earlier on the profile and its importance in defining the transferable skills we want students to develop by the time they graduate. To support this work, the board held public listening sessions to hear directly from students, families, educators, and community members. We asked participants to describe our current graduation requirements in 3 words. The responses, as you can see, include terms like confusing, complicated, stressful, unclear, reflecting a system that often feels overwhelming and disconnected from students' needs. Stakeholders also voiced concerns about barriers created by overly complex requirements, inequities in how these requirements affect different student populations, and a need for more flexibility and relevance in the pathways to graduation. In contrast, when we asked participants how they hope graduation requirements could be described in the future, words like relevant, flexible, meaningful, and clear came up most often. These aspirations will continue to guide our work as we develop a framework that better serves all students. The FutureReady initiative is about more than just how many credits we should have in what subjects. Our objectives focus on aligning graduation requirements with the profile of a graduate, integrating essential skills, and balancing core and elective courses to accommodate diverse interests. We're also prioritizing interdisciplinary learning, recognizing experiences outside traditional classrooms, and centering equity and inclusion. Lastly, we aim to consider implications for earlier grade levels and align requirements with post-secondary expectations to create a seamless transition for students. As we develop this proposal, we're also carefully considering implementation. This includes addressing the supports, resources, and time schools and educators will need to successfully adapt to any changes, ensuring our goals are achievable in practice. Our approach emphasizes collaboration and partnership with students, families, and communities across the state. We are especially focused on elevating the voices of those who haven't been well served by the education system. This is about creating policy with communities, not for them. To support this collaborative approach, we've designed a structure that includes a cross-sector task force, subcommittees focused on specific topics, and community liaisons who will gather input from underrepresented populations. The diagram on this slide illustrates how these components work together. The flow of arrows represents the bi-directional nature of the input, feeding into the task force while also circling back to stakeholders. This process allows for iterative opportunities to refine and improve the proposal throughout its development. In the slides that follow, we'll discuss the role of each of these components and how they contribute to the overall initiative. The FutureReady task force will include approximately 30 members representing students and families, K-12 educators, policymakers, employers, post-secondary education partners, and community-based organizations. Our aim is for the group to reflect the diversity of our state's K-12 population. While we know that with 30 members, we won't be able to represent every group, we are being mindful of intersectionalities and doing our best to ensure broad and inclusive representation. This includes careful attention to historically underserved populations, geographic diversity, and various learning environments, recognizing that graduation requirements can present different challenges depending on the context. It's important to emphasize that the task force is not the end-all be-all or the only way to participate. Beyond the task force, we'll provide multiple ways for others to engage, ensuring a wide range of perspectives are considered. Here's how the different roles break down. So the task force will focus on the big picture, maintaining a holistic perspective as it works toward developing policy recommendations. Some task force members will also serve on subcommittees, which will include additional subject matter experts from outside the task force. And instead of creating entirely new subcommittees, we plan to build on the expertise of existing groups already working in these areas. These subcommittees will dive deeper into specific topics, answering questions posed by the task force while also raising concerns or considerations about emerging recommendations. Although the exact subcommittees will be determined during phase one of the task force, we anticipate having some focused on specific subjects like financial education and computer science, as well as one dedicated to implementation considerations. Community liaisons, who are task force members with lived experience, will play a vital role in collecting community input. They will be compensated for their additional work, which includes conducting listening sessions within their communities and bringing those insights directly into task force discussions. This will help ensure that the voices of students and families remain at the center of the process. Our initiative timeline spans from now up to the 27 legislative session and is divided into 3 phases. In phase 1, we'll establish a shared vision for the diploma, identify gaps, and define the scope of work, including determining the subcommittees needed to support this effort. In phase 2, we'll start developing recommendations with an interim report anticipated for December of 25. In phase 3, we'll shift to preparing a legislative proposal based on the recommendations to be considered during the 27 session. Currently, we're finalizing task force recruitment and are working with a partner organization to help identify, recruit, and onboard community liaisons. We're planning to have an alternating meeting schedule with task force meetings to occur in odd months and board meetings to be held in even months. This approach will help ensure a continuous thread of discussion, allowing for an iterative process where both groups remain aligned and inform one another's work. The timeline for implementing changes will depend on the recommendations yet to be developed. Working collaboratively with the task force subcommittees and community liaisons, the state board will incorporate appropriate implementation timelines into the proposal, along with identifying the resources and supports needed at both the state and local school district levels to ensure successful adoption of proposed changes. Now that you've heard about the FutureReady approach, we'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think will be most important for ensuring the initiative's success. Please take a moment to respond to the poll and feel free to put additional thoughts in the chat. Okay. All right, thank you so much. So it looks like the one that got the 67% indicating it was a top priority is involving a diverse range of partners, of course, including students, families, educators, employers, community-based orgs, and policymakers. We've also got a lot of endorsement of the other priorities, crafting a comprehensive proposal rather than addressing changes in a piecemeal fashion, and in making sure the proposal is informed by implementation considerations. So thank you all, very helpful input to have. Right. Okay, so to successfully carry out this initiative, we need legislative support. As I mentioned earlier, the board already has the authority to undertake this work, and it aligns with our regular responsibilities. But we need to remind the legislature about the thoughtful process already outlined in state law. Specifically, we're asking legislators to avoid introducing new requirements outside of the established process. We are concerned that adding separate requirements on specific subjects could run out of sync with the comprehensive approach we are taking. It risks predetermining outcomes, forcing us to design around them, rather than allowing recommendations to be developed in an authentically collaborative and comprehensive way. Additionally, we have submitted a budget request for modest funding to support the robust stakeholder engagement that is central to this initiative. This request is currently under review by the governor's office, and we expect to learn more when Governor Inslee unveils his budget proposal in mid-December. If you'd like to learn more or stay involved in the FutureReady initiative, we'd encourage you to check out the links on this slide to access handouts, sign up for updates, and fill out our interest form, which will help us tailor upcoming engagement opportunities. I'm going to hand it back to Melissa to wrap us up with a couple more slides.
All right. Finally, we'd like to do one last poll to find out what is your next step after learning more about the FutureReady initiative. Please select all that apply and feel free to share additional thoughts in the chat. Okay, so it looks like a lot of folks want to stay informed about the initiative and future developments, which is wonderful. About 61% of folks plan to share information about the initiative with others in your network. Yay, we love that you want to help us get the word out. We really appreciate that. 64% of folks want to participate in future engagement opportunities like forums or surveys. 24% of folks want to reach out to policymakers or legislators to express your views on the initiative. And we're seeing some folks respond in chat as well. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I know we have not gotten to all of the questions in chat. We certainly do not have all the answers to all of the great questions you're asking right now, since we are just at the very start of this process, but we are looking forward to this process over the next couple of years and looking forward to engaging with all of you multiple times throughout the process. So Jaylee, if you want to go to the next slide for me. Thank you. So we want to thank everyone for being part of today's webinar and for joining us on this journey to reimagine what high school graduation requirements can and should be. Together, we can create a future-ready system that equips all students to thrive in our changing world. So please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions or ideas you might have, and have a fantastic afternoon. Thank you, everybody.